The gospel this morning is from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 28. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Be seated. If this morning you're thinking, didn't we do this text a month ago? Yes, we did. It's an important text. When Paul was writing to the Galatians, he said this in chapter 5, verse 14, "For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment." The whole law. "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." When he was writing to the Romans, in chapter 13, verses 8 and 9, "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Do you know what Jesus did to make the people around him nervous? Do you know? He breathed. His breathing made people nervous. You know why? He's the Son of God. We go past that really quickly. He's the Son of God, the Word made flesh, the lily of the valley, the bright and shining star, capped the mountains, told the oceans where to stop, and the wind how hard to blow. All he had to do was breathe. Part of that was Jesus had an influence that would have someone like Paul, raised in the Jewish community and temple and synagogue, an expert in the law. Do you remember Paul? An expert in the law. Get to a point where he would say, all the laws are summed up in this: love your neighbor as yourself. The text that we see from Luke, a lawyer, some translations don't say a lawyer, they say an expert in the law. What's the difference? The difference is the way that it's presented. An expert in the law. My lawyer friends will tell me not every lawyer is an expert in the law. Some of you are smiling now. This is an expert in the law. He knows it backwards and forwards. But he's not coming for an education. He's not coming for a blessing. He's not coming for a word from the rabbi, from the Son of God. He's coming to pick a fight. And I'll show you the verse in a minute or two that shows that reminds us of that. He's coming to fight. And so this expert in the law comes to Jesus and says, "Rabbi, tell me, if you'll show it on the screen for me, tell me, show me, tell me, how do I be a good neighbor? How do I live a good life? How do I please God? What should I do to inherit eternal life?" Do you hear what this religious expert in the law is saying? How can I have immortality? How can I live forever? The statement being, how can I make this work for me? How can I make this work for me? Let me see my preacher friends in here. There are still religious leaders today trying to figure out how to make this work for me. Because at the end of the day, he is an expert in religious law. He's an expert in the first 5 books of the Bible. He knows it backwards and forwards, and he's come to pick a fight. He's come to show that he's right. He's come to stand on behalf of all of the Jewish people, or the people that were raised in synagogues and temples, because this Jesus is breathing. And he's breathing these things. You no longer come to God. You no longer experience God merely through sacrifices. The door that opens to God does not come from you bringing sacrifices to the altar. It doesn't come from you living by these set of laws or rules. All these laws, all these rules are summed up into one place. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the way that you get to God is through me. It's heretical for this teacher of the law. It's heretical for this expert in the law for Jesus to say, it is no longer the law that brings you to God, it's me. And so Jesus is creating chaos amongst the religious leaders. How do you know it? Because they're going to kill him for it. They're going to kill him because he's creating chaos in the religious community. He's teaching them and saying to them, through me and through my teachings, you come to God. And they're struggling because there are people that are no longer showing up in temple and synagogue, but they're now showing up in a house church. They're now showing up in the valley. They're now showing up at the River Jordan, and they're giving their lives to Jesus instead of these rules and these laws that we've all agreed upon. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they've known for centuries, for generations, that this is the way that it's supposed to be. This is how we do it. And now this upstart, this heretic is pulling people away from it. This expert in the law has shown up to say, tell me how to live forever, you, O Son of God. And you know what Jesus could have done here? He could have whooped him. I need you to hear me. He could have whooped him right now. He could have bent him over his knee and whooped him. But he didn't. You know why? Because he ain't us. He's Jesus. And through grace, he created space for this expert in the law. He throttled down. Now, I need to apologize to you for a second. You're fixing to sit through a Silver Comet bike story. I will not do this every week, I promise. But yesterday, Jen and I were out on the trail, and I'd put 3 miles into my Apple thing. And I've got 3 miles, and I'm turning back, and I'm about 1.5 miles into that back. I'm dying. I'm dying. I'm ready to get off the bike, throw it into the ditch, into the grass over there, and walk. And I'm just done. And about the time I'm getting ready to stop, this guy flies past me. Now, some of you are sitting here going, he was probably running past Derek on the bike, but that's not how he flew past me. He was on the bike. And if you know anything about a bike, if you're standing up on that bike and you're driving on the bike and you are going, and he is standing up on that bike and he flies past me. I'm like, no. And about 50 yards up, I see this boy, 8, 9, 10 years old, and he is pedaling his bike for all it's worth. He is just grinding on that bike, just killing it. And I was like, well, you about to get passed, son. You about to get whooped. And you know what that guy did? About 10 yards behind him, he throttled down. He throttled down and pulled up behind him and stayed behind him. And that little boy would look over his shoulder. It was his left shoulder. Every time he'd look over that left shoulder, and he'd just go harder. And that guy would just stay 10 yards back. After about 1/2 mile of that little boy pulled over to his family, pushed the bike into the ditch, and went, I won! I won! I beat him! I won! And the family looked at him like, have you been drinking on the bike? And that guy just kept going. He throttled down to create space through grace of letting this young man, of letting this little boy have this unbelievable win. And his day was the best day he's had in a long time. That's space through grace. And you know what I did? I kept that guy in my sight for the next mile until I was done. I could not lose him. I could not take my eye off of him, and my legs were no longer tired, because that That was the best sermon I'm going to see here for the next 6 months. That is what Jesus did with that expert in the law. He could have passed him, he could have blown past him, but he throttled down and said, there's more important here than showing how smart I am. There's more important here than showing how fast I can ride this bicycle. There's more important here than just being right. And he brings it back. And he makes it safe for this expert in the law to listen and to hear. And you would think that would be a magical moment, but it's not. It's not. Because verse 29, if the story would have ended on 28, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and your neighbor as yourself, it'd be wonderful. It'd be an easy text. We could take that text, we could take this and go, we love our neighbors. We love all our neighbors. We love those we don't know. We love those we don't agree with. We love those we can't stand, those that can't stand us. We're good Christians. We got this Jesus thing. We just have it in our hearts and we believe it. We believe in Jesus. We believe it. And we go, yes. I mean, we know how the story's going to go. We know Jesus is going to talk about the Good Samaritan and loving your enemies, and we understand that, and we have it right here. But Jesus never stops here. He always goes here. And in verse 29, we see the threat from the expert when he says, wanting to justify himself, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And so this is where we've always heard this sermon and know this text. This is how we know it. The Good Samaritan's coming next, and the story of the Good Samaritan, and Jesus teaching us and showing us, and they're going to surprise this ruler. They're going to surprise this expert. It's going to surprise everybody, because the Good Samaritan is the Samaritan that they can't. We know it. We got it. And we put it in our heads, and we go, we're good people, because we know the Jesus stuff. But what if Jesus was serious? What if he was serious? And it wasn't just an application for our minds, but for our hearts. We were in the fellowship hall about 5-6 weeks ago. It was right after Marita Harrell, Reverend Harrell, was killed. And the conference and the district had asked us to gather preachers to pray with and to provide pastoral care. And I walked in, and I saw this well-dressed gentleman. I saw this man in the fellowship hall. And you know how you see somebody that you don't know, but you know that you know them? You know what I'm talking about? I see him, and I went, oh, who is that? Now, he is surrounded by preachers that I've known 15, 20 years. He's surrounded by folks that I've done ministry with, that I've known forever. And he's surrounded by them in a sanctuary, in a fellowship hall, in my church, with my church members. I'm going, I know him, but I can't place him. He's not a preacher. He's not, how am I not getting this? And then I start walking towards him, and he does that Spider-Man thing where he points at me, and then I point at him. You know what I'm talking about? We point at each other, and I go, oh my, that's the guy whose trash sits by my trash every Tuesday morning. It was my next door neighbor. I mean next door neighbor as in we share a driveway next door neighbor. Dr. Darrell. And you know what Dr. Darrell does? He's a psychotherapist who specializes in Christian pastoral counseling. Boy, that would have been good to have over the last 18 months. That would have been nice to know. But do you know, before I got out of the room, what I was doing? Derek, you're really busy. I mean, you're really busy, Derek. Give yourself a break. Cut yourself a break, Derek. I mean, do you know how many people you deal with a day and how much ministry you do? You get home, Derek, you just want to stop. You just want to take a break. You just, Derek, don't beat yourself up, Derek. It's fun in my head. But then I remember this stupid story. It should have stopped at 28, because Jesus tells this story about this man who was going down the Jericho road who is beaten, and a priest comes by, and the priest says, I'm just too busy for this. I'm just too busy for this. I don't have time for this. And so as I was telling that story, and you got to the Dr. Darrell with me, and you realized how embarrassed I was and how hard that was for me, you thought of people in your own life and your own neighbors, and you went, well, Derek, don't go there. I'm too busy. You have no idea what my schedule is, Derek. I'm not even sure I like everybody in my house, much less my neighborhood, Derek. Take a deep breath. Let me tell you the story. Because after the preacher goes by, came the good Christian folks, the good Jewish folks, the good religious folks. And you know what they said? I'm too busy. I got too many responsibilities. I can't stop. What if Jesus was serious? And he didn't just mean theory. He meant the people that live across the street from you, the people that live next door to you. What if Jesus meant your neighbor? And it goes from here to here. And we're called to love and to embrace the people that we see every day and not be too busy. Because if you're too busy to love people, do you know what that is? That's sin. If we're too busy, if we have too much in our stuff in our life to be able to embrace people, to love people, to care for people, to see that people are pedaling as hard and as fast as they can, and it's not fast enough, and to not see that Jesus comes behind them and is trying to encourage them, and we don't come up behind that, you know what that is? That's sin. And many of us are caught up in the busyness of sin. What if Jesus was serious when he said, love your neighbor? Love your neighbor. At 12:30 tomorrow, we'll have staff meeting. 12:30 every Monday, staff meeting. And we're going to walk this in. It's the art of neighboring. We're going to be doing this. You've got the sheets in your bulletin. You've got the handout in your bulletin. I'm going to be encouraging you and inviting you to do this as well. We will put it on the refrigerator in our house. Each of the boxes represents the 8 houses or apartments that are closest to yours. Now, Daryl and Ellen live right next to us. I don't know what Ellen does. She wasn't there that day. Next to Daryl and Ellen are Kenny and Natasha. You know how I know that? Because I knew what I was going to be preaching, and I asked Jen Friday, hey, what are their names? You know how Jen knows it? They have a baby. Jen will hang out in the front yard so she can hold that baby, and Kenny and Natasha just get in the way. Her. See, I didn't even know the child was a boy or girl. I stink at this too. What if Jesus was serious to love our neighbor, to engage our neighbor? Each box represents the 8 houses. Write your address in the middle box. Fill in the 3 subpoints, A, B, and C. This will be on social media and in an email to you today. Names of the people who live in the house, first and last names if possible, but if it's just first, that's okay. And the people that are around you. Relevant information about each person that you could see from the driveway viewpoint. Are there small bicycles in the front? You know what that means? They have small children. Here's a harder one. If somebody in the house cuts their grass with scissors, do you know what that means? They're retired and have absolutely nothing to do. And they cut their grass with scissors because it has to be perfect. Some of y'all are doing that. I can see it on your family's faces. I can see it right now. But you learn about the people in your neighborhood. You learn about the people that you live with, that live around you. And I'm not talking about walking in with the plan of salvation. I'm talking about walking in with a casserole. I'm talking about walking in with a bag of cookies from the ministry team here. I'm talking about just a chance to say hello. I'm talking about taking seriously the teachings of Jesus Christ. Because next comes in-depth info that you would know after connecting, career plans, dreams, anything meaningful that you would know. Because Jesus is serious. And one of the biggest problems that we have in our culture today is we've allowed ourselves to think that if I get this in concept, that we think if I get this in its idea and I believe this, that belief is okay. What we need is a little less conversation and a lot more action. What we need is to take it out of just conversing and put it into practice, and to be a people, to be a church that engages people, that engages our neighbors and loves our neighbors. And if they ask why you're doing this, you can say, because Jesus told me to. And I want to follow Jesus. I want to be close to Jesus. What if Jesus was serious? I was talking to a Methodist preacher friend of mine. If the stewards will come on into place, I know I'm running out of time. I was talking to a Methodist preacher friend of mine. Donna, you know him. His name's Jason Burnham. He and Addie, his daughter, drive Cliff's truck. that Jason. I love him. He is he's one of the leading voices for the Global Methodist Church in Texas. He is Global Methodist all the way. And when I was talking to him Thursday night, he was telling me, he said, I've got friends that I've known 15, 20 years that just spit when I walk by now. They're no longer friends because they don't believe what I believe and they hate me. If he walked in the door right now, I'd hug him and love him. And not because people are being mean to him, because I love him. Reverend Richard Reams in Charleston, South Carolina, during all of this, he didn't surrender his credentials, but he just said, I couldn't do it anymore. People were so mean to me, and preachers were so mean, and the church was just so nasty. He said, I had to walk away from the local church. I had to walk away from the parish. And today he is organizing and coordinating a ministry, a home for those diagnosed with HIV and AIDS, and it's a ministry for them, for that community. He said, Derek, I couldn't do it anymore. It was just too mean. He walks in that door right now. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run to him and I'm going to hug him. That's my guy. That's my man, $100,000. I know what you're hearing stuff about sides and all that other stuff, and it just doesn't matter. What matters is this teaching from Jesus Christ to love our neighbor, to love the one in front of us, to be a blessing and to embrace and to engage and to share the love of Christ with all. And we should hear Jesus and know that he's serious, and that means the people that live across the street from you, next to you. That means everyone. A little less conversation and a lot more action. Amen?